On the next Probably True Solar Stories, we conclude a murder of solar crows. 4 thieves have tried to strip 2 solar farms of their copper wire, solar panels, and other equipment, but a brown tabby cat and her animal friends keep getting in their way. Will the gang finally beat her on the 3rd job? Welcome back to Probably True Solar Stories and the conclusion of A Murder of Solar Crows, one of our regular solar noir stories. I'm Tor Solar Fred Valenza, and I'm trying to get solar into pop culture. If you missed part 1 of this story, I'd recommend clicking on the part 1 link in the show notes. Also in the show notes, you'll find our true solar takeaways that separate this episode's solar facts from solar fiction. Before we continue our story, let me remind you about what happened in part 1. Spoiler alerts ahead. A detective has been interviewing Mr. Watt, aka Mark Jameson. Mr. Watt is the lone survivor of the gruesome murders of the Kleptovoltaics gang. He insists that he did not murder his 3 associates, and so he tells the detective about what really happened. At the end of the last episode, the gang is driving away from a posse of 200 angry jackrabbits. The gang thinks they've escaped, but then they reach the solar farm's gate and realize that one of them must get out of the truck and open the gate's lock without the rabbits attacking and turning them into a human carrot stick. Which gang member will have the courage to open the gate? Let's find out.
Boom. La 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 la. Oh, oh, la 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 la.
A Murder of Solar Crows Part 2 is written and read by Tor Solarfred Valenza. So eventually we speed ahead. I look in the side mirror and I see there's Miss Tabby leading 200 rabbits chasing after us. You'd think we're in the clear, right? They can't outrun a van. But we closed the solar park gate. And we even put our own lock on it in case anybody came by to see what the new maintenance crew was doing. That meant that one of us had to go outside, pull out the key, put the key in the lock, and pull open the gate. But these jackrabbits are coming at us at like 30 miles an hour. There was no time. So who was it going to be? Who was going to get out of the van? That person was going to become a human carrot stick, and we all knew it. So Mr. Electron, he backs up at full speed and pop, 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 he's bumping into rabbits. And then he goes forward again at full speed and he crashes through the gates without stopping. Which is why destruction of private property is added to the indictment. Better that than being rabbit food detective. When we got back to the warehouse, yeah, I admit we had a disagreement about trying again in another vineyard or just giving up. But it didn't lead to violence. It was a discussion. Mr. Electron couldn't believe that could happen again. He was out of a lot of money, including a loss of tools and repairs to the truck. The other reason why he wanted to move forward was because we had buyers set up for the used panels and the inverters. Plus, the copper scrap prices were still high. Except, we had nothing to sell. That's why I wanted to try again, too. I needed the money. Unemployment was gone. And who knows, maybe I'd be hired to fix what we broke. But with so many solar people out of work, I doubted it. So I was willing to take the risk to finally get the job done. It was $10,000 for a few nights' work. But Mr. Photon and Mr. Kilowatt, they were still freaked out. Kilowatt said, "It's like these animals are guard dogs protecting the project." "That's ridiculous," I told him. "Why would animals give a shit about solar project?" He said he just couldn't believe that it was a coincidence. It was like they were trying to stop us. Mr. Photon was the superstitious one. He said, "Yeah, it's like they're possessed, like they were in a trance and being directed by the tabby cat." I said, "So you're saying that the tabby cat is like Dracula?" "Come on, Photon. This isn't monsters or zombie cats. People would think that solar was magic if they didn't know physics. Same here. This is science. Cause and effect. Animals react to things for a reason. We're doing something that's upsetting the environment. Maybe it's territorial, maybe it's our smell. Maybe one of us is wearing cologne or soap or some kind of pheromone signal that says attack us. We smell dangerous. Seriously, Photon says to me. Seriously. That's probably it. I say we wear old clothes next time. Something with our heavy natural scent. No detergents, no cologne, no deodorants. Just let's be as completely natural smelling as possible. We turn off our cell phones, so no electronic signals. Neutral brown colors, nothing bright or reflective. We've got to be like cavemen, as natural as possible. And then you'll see, the animals are going to be animals, and us humans are going to be humans. Okay, Photon says. He's up for one more time on the next holiday weekend. Which is, Mr. Kilowatt asked. Memorial Day, I said. We're going to do the whole weekend and make up for our losses. And finally, here we are, Mark. Here's where you're going to tell me how the tabby cat or some animals killed your 3 colleagues. That's right, Detective. The animals did kill my colleagues. For a week before the job, we showered with nothing but water. No soap, no shampoo, no deodorant. Same with our clothes. We weren't dirty or sweaty. Water alone takes off a lot of scent. But whatever human smells like, that's what we smelled like. I cased out Fat Farm Estates the week before, just to see what the animal situation was like. There were the usual birds, but I didn't see any rabbits or gopher holes or murder of crows on poles, lines, or towers. It all looked normal. The only problem that bothered me from a solar O&M standpoint was that the ground cover was creeping up solar trackers. Wait, O&M? Operations and maintenance. So what are you saying? I'm saying they needed to mow the lawn, and that turned out to be the warning sign. So you were worried about the critters that were hiding in the lawn and that they were going to attack? Yeah, but that didn't happen. It was worse than that. And once again, Detective, you're not going to believe me. I won't, and I don't, and neither will a jury. But the tape is still running. Go ahead with your insanity defense. I am not insane. This really happened. We cut the locks at around 1 a.m. and drove in. This time we didn't relock the gate. Everything was quiet. There was no full moon, no wolves howling, nothing spooky. Just the regular buzzing sound of the inverters and the cicadas. Still, we were nervous. We waited in the truck to see if there were any birds, cats, dogs, or anything that would crawl out of the ground cover grass, but nothing did. After about 10 minutes, Electron says, "Fuck it," and he gets out of the truck and he grabs his tool belt. We followed him, and we got to work. About an hour later, that quiet, everything is normal sound changed. I heard the sound of sheep. Sheep? Yeah, sheep. Remember when I said the ground cover was too tall? Well, one way to cut grass is with people with a weed whacker or a mower. The other, more natural way is hiring a sheep farmer to let their sheep graze around the solar farm. It's pretty common, so we figured they must have hired them the night before we came. That's why I didn't see them when I was casing the joint. So you heard "bah" and that scared you? Yeah. And then when I looked up and over the solar panel I was uninstalling, I saw them. They were all bunched up in a herd, like 20 tracker rows away. They were mowing and eating the grass between the tracker rows. But you didn't run, Mark. No. Would you run from sheep? It was normal. They weren't chasing after us. They were just grazing. That's what they do. I've seen it 1,000 times at other solar farms. So I went back to work. But then, like 15 minutes later, I look up and the sheep are grazing a lot closer. I saw one chewing and suddenly look up at me, like it stared, and that freaked me out. "The sheep are getting closer," I called out to the others. "So what? What can sheep do?" said Mr. Electron. "Keep working." I didn't know what sheep could do, and I didn't want to know. I looked up again at the sheep, and it took a step closer. And then it got to me. Maybe sheep grazing was normal for a solar farm, but I knew there was something wrong. "Nope, I'm done." I started going back to the truck. Electron calls back at me, and he pulls out his gun. "Get back here." I ignored him. He wasn't going to shoot me. I picked up my tools and head back to the truck, and that's when it was confirmed that this was no normal sheep grazing. Standing in front of the truck, licking her paws, was Miss Tabby. The same Tabby from the other 2 jobs? Yes, Detective. It was her. I was like 10 feet away from the truck. I went left, and she went left. I went right, and she went right. Then I looked behind me, and the sheep were still grazing, but they were starting to graze closer behind me. "The tabby's at the truck," I yelled to the others. They shrugged. I figured, screw it. Tabby or no tabby, I'm getting into that truck. I took a few steps, and then I heard another baa. And then 30 white, fluffy sheep move in between me and Miss Tabby. It was like a white wave, you know? Like if you were standing on the beach and a wave rolled across your feet, except this wave was made of wool and hooves. They flooded this space between me and the van, and suddenly I was up to my knees in sheep, eating the grass underneath me. And that's when I felt a tug on my pant leg. I look down, and I see one starting to nibble on my jeans. I wasn't going to stand there, so I ran towards the truck. But they were like packed together, like I'd have to stand on them to get through. I tried, of course, and I fell through the sheep cracks. For a moment, I was on my back, and 3 sheep were about to start grazing on my face. But I got up in time, and I just pushed my way to one of the clear tracker rows. I looked toward the exit. About 20 were grazing in front of the gate. I started going towards them, and they looked up, chewing. I heard another bah, and it was like a command. They stopped chewing and started herding toward me. I looked back at Mr. Electron and Mr. Photon and Mr. Kilowatt. They were all stuck too. They were all surrounded and up to their thighs in woolly sheep. They kind of looked in shock, and I said, "Move! Move now, or you're never going to move again." Mr. Electron took out his gun, and he shot 1 bullet into the air. Their ears flicked and twitched, but none of the sheep moved. "Son of a bitch," he said. "I think one of them is nibbling on my jean zipper. Sheep perverts, eat this, lamb chops." And then Mr. Electron points his 9mm at the sheep closest to him and starts shooting. They weren't zombie sheep. He killed them. The fallen sheep carcasses made a small circle around him. But the others, they didn't care, Detective. They looked up, then kept eating what was on the ground, including their fallen brothers and sisters. And then they started moving in on Electron again, who was now out of bullets. "Run," I said. I didn't want them to die, Detective. And finally, he listened to me. He did run. I saw Kilowatt and Photon also running through the solar tracker rows, but the sheep followed them, and the 2 of them started running into another herd. She was trying to trap us. She, Miss Tabby, she was directing them.
Give me a break, Mark.
I told you weren't going to believe me. Anyway, Photon lets loose some mace on his side, but they didn't seem to care. They just kept coming. Mr. Kilowatt takes out a blast horn, and the sheep's ears shook a little, but that didn't scare them either. Like me at the truck, they started tightening up their formation, and like me, Kilowatt tried to step over them, and he tripped to the ground. I saw him try to get up, but then one of the sheep put her hooves on his chest, and then she laid her whole body on him. Kilowatt thought that was funny, until he felt a sheep eating and tearing into his hair. He tried to get up, but every time he did, he slipped, and they took another bite, until one must have bit into a vein or something, because he just gave up. Photon and Electron went the same way. They got corralled and trapped, and then nibble by nibble, they were pulled down to the ground. I know I heard one of them laugh in disbelief, then I heard screams, fighting them off, but they just couldn't move, or when they did, they fell down again. At one point, I saw Mr. Photon get up, take a few steps, and fall on top of the herd around him. He was floating on this moving cloud of white wool, all bloody, and then a few of them parted, and he dropped into a circle. Then the circle closed in, and that's the last I saw of him, Detective. But I heard him screaming until he stopped.
That's a great horror story, Mark. Except for some reason, Miss Tabby and the sheep let you go. How did that happen?
That's another weird story, Detective. I ran for the fence. I figured I could scale it or at least get higher. I thought it was just a barbed wire, but it was electric. So when I put my hand on it, I got zapped and pulled away. So there I was against the fence. The voltage wasn't enough to kill me, but it hurt every time I grabbed it. Meanwhile, Miss Tabby led her herd in front of me, and I was trapped. I didn't know what to do and I started to cry. I said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I won't ever do it again. I'll fix the solar farm. I'll build more solar if you let me live. I'm sorry. And that's when Miss Tabby stopped moving forward. It was like she was thinking about what I said. And then she kind of swished her tail to the left, and then to the right. And then suddenly the sheep stopped moving in on me. They just kept buying. I don't know, maybe they were voting on what I said. All I know is we'd made a lot of noise, and that's when the police came. The herd broke up, and here I am, Detective. You can throw me in for attempted robbery and destruction of private property. I'm confessing to that. But I didn't butcher the others. The autopsy is going to show who really murdered them. And after I get out of prison, I'm going to keep my promise to Miss Tabby. I'm going to find a job and build more solar projects. And if no one will hire me, I'll train other people. I'm sorry for what I did. And as soon as I'm out, I'm going to find Miss Tabby, and I'm going to make it up to her. I'm going to tell her what I did, and I'm going to show her that people can change.
The previous recording was of Mark Oscar Jameson, a.k.a. Mr. Watt. After the autopsy confirmed that Mr. Jameson's accomplices were mauled by non-rabid sheep, Mr. Jameson was arraigned and pleaded not guilty on advice from counsel. I reminded Mr. Jameson about his recorded confession. Mr. Jameson told me that he had changed his mind because after talking to his lawyer told him he had a viable insanity defense. So Mr. Jameson decided to go along with it. After posting bond, Mr. Jameson was released and left the courthouse. 30 minutes later, while driving on Laval Valley Road, witnesses report that Mr. Jameson swerved to miss hitting a tabby cat crossing in front of him and flipped his pickup truck. Mr. Jameson was pronounced deceased at the scene, and as a result, the judge has abated the proceedings and the case is now closed. In a related matter, I've alerted Sonoma County Animal Control about a potentially dangerous tabby cat who lives around Vineyard Solar Farms.
Oh, people, will you never learn? Don't mess with Mother Nature or tabby cats who love solar power. Was this story meant to be a climate change allegory? If that's the way you want to interpret it, fine with me. Originally, this idea came from a client's blog post about the increase in kleptovoltaics, the stealing of solar equipment from large solar projects, and how solar project owners can increase their security. I'll have a link to that blog in the show notes. After I read that blog, I thought about one of my favorite authors, Stephen King, and I thought, how would Stephen King creatively increase security on a solar project in a horror kind of way? And then I thought about the sheep farmers that really do get hired to mow ground cover at solar farms. And as I was thinking of that, my cat, Edie, walked into my office. And then the story wrote itself. Thematically, yeah, it did turn out to be a revenge of Mother Nature story. I feel like animals are victims of climate change, and it's not like they can sue humans or force them to reverse it. Even if they could sue, and even if they won, they don't care about money. I suppose they could ask a judge to force oil and gas companies to stop polluting and force them to transition to a clean energy business model. As for the death of Mark Jameson, a.k.a. Mr. Watt, I don't think Miss Tabby liked him pleading not guilty after his promise to her. Clearly, she made Mr. Watt pay for his crimes in her own special way. That's it for this episode of Probably True Solar Stories. Don't forget to check the show notes for our true solar takeaways. If you like this episode, please do share it with other solar or even horror fans. And if you get a chance, please do give Probably True Solar Stories a rating and a review on your favorite podcast streaming service. A Murder of Solar Crows was written and read by me, Tor Solarfred Filenza. Probably True Solar Stories is a production of Unthink Solar, PR, and Communications. Be bold for solar, stand out, and educate. See you next time.